Oh, hello. Welcome to today's Decay. We're celebrating bursts of beginnings of everything important since the dawn of time. April 18th edition. What happened today, you ask? Oh man, this has seen better days. 1884 today, Frank R. Paul was born. Here's an original Frank R. Paul for amazing stories. You're too young to know it, but in October 1926, magazines could talk, and this one would say, "Take me home, little boy, you will love me." And it did, too, to a young Forrest J. Ackerman, and it inspired him to shape the 20th and 21st century's science fiction, horror, fantasy, filmmakers, writers, artists, sculptors, animators, you name it. This book right here is what hit, in 1926, what he as a little kid saw on the newsstands and was his gateway into Imagine Movies, fandom, Famous Monsters magazine, The Shock Monster, Vampirella, you name it. And it was all, the cover art here is by none other than Frank R. Paul, who he then wound up living in a mansion in the Hollywood Hills with full walls that he would lovingly refer to as his Frank R. Paul walls. His all his original paintings from his pulp magazines he illustrated. Yeah, really good one here. Let's be very careful with this, shall we? All right. Next, Carl Burgos, born today, 1916. This is super fun. Nowhere near as original and delicate. Carl Burgos is the creator of Timely Comics, which was the company that published Marvel Comics, if you're following this, in 1939, featuring the first appearance of the original Human Torch. That's not the Johnny Storm Human Torch, but rather the one that was like a robot that anytime his skin touched the air, would ignite into flames and horribly burn everyone around him, whether they were like good guys, bad guys, innocents, what have you. And he wound up very often meeting up with the Submariner, and the two of them would get into these like raging knockdown fights over the skies of Art Deco New York City, like derailing subway cars, flipping buses, hitting into skyscrapers. Who is good, who is bad? One is an indifferent Atlantean who hates the human race, and the other is a cold, also indifferent robot. I don't know, but it's a lot of fun to read, and all this stuff from this like early era of Golden Age Timely or Marvel Comics is like filled with like really primitive artwork and all sorts of great monsters. It makes like almost no sense, but it's kind of perfect, I gotta say. Yeah. What is a good example? Here's an early, this is Bill Everett. Anyway, one of the things that I particularly love about doing this here program is that when there's connections, because Frank R. Paul did the actual artwork that graced the cover of Marvel Comics #1, right? Carl Burgos did create the Human Torch, but who illustrated him on the front cover of Marvel Comics #1? Frank R. Paul. Right? I know. Yeah. What else? Nigel Neal, born in 1922. He's really interesting. I feel like ever since the holidays this year, I got like really into BBC ghost stories, like created in the 60s and 70s and 80s. So like a lot of those, probably like that started with like the M.R. James, Whistle I'll Come to You, My Lad, and The Signalman, and then like every holiday season they kept doing more and more ghost stories for Christmas type content. But Nigel Neal predates all that. In like the 50s and 60s was writing the Quatermass Experiment, and then in the 70s did the Stone Tape, which was pretty crazy, and a redone version of Quatermass, which was like a post-apocalyptic, almost like Mad Max seeming thing with like hippies and stuff in like Mad Max type universe. I don't know, maybe not hippies. Anyway, Clockwork Orange-esque. Yeah, dystopian. That's the word I was looking for. Quatermass, but dystopian. Right, and even was, I think, the uncredited writer on Halloween 3, John Carpenter's Halloween 3. There's some drama behind that, as well as being involved with the 1989 BBC production of The Woman in Black, which is a lot of fun. This is all like stuff I've found just recently. Not all of those, some of those. Yeah. Yeah. So, and there was like I think an exhibit here on like the work and life of Nigel Neal a bunch of years ago, and I missed it. I didn't really realize like the breadth of his career, and kicking myself now about it. It's unfortunate. Yeah. All right. What else? The Misfits played their first live set at CBGB's Today in 1977. That's not their first show ever. That's not their first lineup ever, but it was the first time in 77 that they graced the stage of CBGB's. I don't know if you like the sounds of that. I like the sounds of that, but a little bit more fitting. On this day in 1981, why the Meteors, Paul Fennick specifically, the Psychobilly Kid, graced the covers of Sound magazine. And what a sound it was, huh? Yeah. There you go. Let's find the article, page 14, right? Page 14. There we go. Devil's Music Hooligans. April 18th, 1981. A meteorological forecast. Hyping the Meteor Madness film that opened for Dance Craze and their Voodoo Rhythm, Maniac Rockers from Hell, My Daddy's a Vampire, You Can't Keep a Good Man Down, 45. Yeah, it's a good day. Oh, look, here's the Cure Faith advertisement. I love these old Sound magazines. You could just, like, get lost in wonderful advertisements and, like, the idea, like, how many bands were playing every single night of the week. Sounds exhausting, right? Right. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, April 18th. All exciting things to not make your April 18th as April 18th-ish as you thought it was. Does that make sense? Till tomorrow. Goodbye.